Hello and welcome back to Hudson Auto Films. You join me on a lovely rainy English day, and of course we are back on the Nova. In the last episode I introduced the rather exciting turbocharged Alfa Romeo engine that we are putting in the Nova. You guys really liked it, however a few of you were quite rightfully concerned that all of the extra power might cause a few issues with our chassis. And well, in today's episode we are addressing just that. We are going to build a custom exoskeleton to weld and bolt onto our chassis so it can handle all of those extra horses. So it is going to be a very exciting session. Let's do this. Many of you will know that just a couple of weeks ago this chassis was completely rotten. There was barely anything left of it. But now look at it. But even though it's now solid, it won't be strong enough to handle all the extra horsepower we'll be throwing at it. It was only designed to take maybe 100 horsepower, 150 if you're lucky, but obviously we're going for quite a lot more than that. So we need to get this chassis properly beefed up so it can handle all of that extra juice. But first things first, I want to get the front axle back home and cleaned. It is covered in decades upon decades of dirt and grime, and by the end of this episode, I would like to test fit it back on the chassis. And it seems a little bit wrong to put it on whilst it's all dirty and the chassis is all nice and clean. Not to mention, next week we are diving into the suspension, making that much more beefed up as well, so it would be much nicer to strip down a clean axle than a grimy one. I have to say, I do feel a little bit sore after the amount of times I've had to move this axle over the last couple of weeks. Yeah, I need to figure out a better way of doing that. At this point I needed to head back to the barn to start the chassis build. So with the wheels off the axle, I decided to cover the whole thing in brake cleaner and a variety of other degreasers and let it sit. We'll check back in with the axle later and get it properly cleaned up, ready to fit back on the car. Oh, steady. Well, before we continue beefing out this chassis and making it capable of handling many more wild horses, there's something that dawned on me. It's all very well and exciting having ridiculously messed around cars as your hobbyist car, but imagine committing a lot of money to a car that you hope to drive every day and finding out that its history wasn't quite as clean as you thought. Well, that is where today's sponsor, Car Vertical, come in, and they are the go-to for all car vehicle history checks. If you're looking to buy a car with Car Vertical, you just chuck in the number plate or VIN number straight into your phone or laptop on their website, and it will immediately pull up this detailed report. In this case, I pulled up a report on this Jaguar XJ, an excellent car, you'd hope. And immediately, as you can see, we're hit with a bunch of yellow warnings, a warning on mileage, damage, and emissions, which is not a good start. Without a tool like Car Vertical, this would easily be skimmed over and you'd end up with a car with a very different history to what you thought. As you can see, we scroll through the report, we've got this detailed bank of photographs, which clearly shows some significant accident damage, which again, could have easily been covered up. Repairs are getting so good, I've said this before, it is phenomenal, so that immediately makes that clear. But as we scroll down, even more interestingly, we reach the mileage area, and this was flagged at the very beginning of the report. And what's particularly interesting about this report is it doesn't necessarily show the mileage has been messed around with, but it shows the car did sit unused for over a year, which is a big warning, and that obviously ties in potentially with the accident that we can see happen in the photographs. Scrolling down further, we've got some green flags, no financial issues, which is all good. But then we reach another flag point, the damage. Obviously, we saw the pictures, but what's great about Car Vertical is it has all of the dates and the details about each accident the car has had. And in the case of this Jag, well, it's had one in 2016, 2019, another in 2019, and wow, another one in 2019. 2019 was not a good year for this Jag. In today's market, Car Vertical really is an essential step. Sellers are getting better and better at hiding this stuff, so have that peace of mind and don't get caught out. So what are you waiting for? Please do check them out. Their link is in the description. You can use my code Hudson for 20% off. You can also scan the QR code somewhere on the screen, and that will take you there and get you your 20% off. So do check them out. Remember, sponsors like Car Vertical make episodes like this possible, so a huge thank you to them. But anyway, on that note, let's make this chassis nice and strong. Not only did we want to add a lot of extra strength down the central tunnel where a lot of our forces will be travelling, we also wanted to create something that secured the outer portions of the floor pan. Right now, they just sort of hang there, and obviously they bolt onto the body, but it's all very floppy. And floppy is never a good thing. So presenting our very thick box section. As you can see, we've made a small cut in the center of the beam. This is so we can get around the drop floor pan. It is not set in place. Right now we're just trying to figure out what angle we need it to clear that area and just the general positioning of this strengthening beam. After a little bit of trimming on the box section, we are able to slot it in to one of the lipped corners on the frame head. This will make things particularly strong. Obviously this will be welded on, but the fact the forces will be pushing into the frame head as opposed to sitting on top of the frame head, well, it will add a lot more rigidity.
Yeah. A gnat's cock in there. Right.
Say a gnat's cock?
A gnat's cock, yeah.
I've never heard that before.
A gnat is obviously a small insect.
So a gnat's cock is
must be
very small.
Thinner than a Rizzler paper.
Yeah. And with a new expression learned, we also had the first of our strengthening beams mocked up in place. So next up, we need to do exactly the same for the opposite side, get them set next to each other and see how everything communicates. So now both of our primary beams were clamped in place. Now it was time to make them work together. We're going to join them up across the whole section and then hopefully it'll be pretty strong.
How's she looking?
Like crap. Now with our cross sections in place and with our giant X member clamped down and measured up, it was time to get this thing tacked together.
There she goes. Alright, yeah, just melted my glove right off.
Jeez. And now with everything nicely welded together, well, as nice as one of my welds can be, we could lift this thing off and admire what we'd made.
Hey. Turn it.
Cool. Look at that. Now that is some beef.
Look at that. Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Right.
But obviously, as you can see, this metal has been sitting around for quite a while, so it's time to clean this thing up. We're also going to add a little bit more strength here and there, especially where the two pieces meet in the middle. And then we'll just about be ready to prime this thing up. And now with our main X section nicely cleaned up and ready for paint, it's time to start on part 2 of the chassis strengthening. The plan is to make a bracket that bolts between the torsion tube cover, which is that black piece, and the actual suspension mounting point itself. We can then use our new bracket to weld more box section, which will wrap around the outer portion of the floor pan and then eventually connect with our X section in the middle. This will make the outer portions of our floor pan much stronger and also just help everything marry up together with our central strength. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this very well, but I suppose you'll just have to watch and see. But this does seem like a good moment to say, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. About 70 to 80% of people who watch my videos aren't actually subscribed, so please do consider supporting the channel. We work really hard every week to make fun, interesting content about very silly cars, so your support would be really appreciated. Okay, so obviously nothing is cleaned up yet, but this is roughly where it will be sitting. We'll then bend the top bit down and that will give us a nice flat surface to mount the next bit of box section to. But now we just need to drill 4 holes so this can sit nicely between the torsion tube cover and the actual suspension mounting point. So that way.
Yeah. Do the holes line up? Do the holes line up?
What's cool about this outer portion we're designing is, even though it mounts to our key X section in the middle, the outer bit is fully detachable. I reckon it's a hammer job.
Oh, it's been in there.
Ooh, bugger.
Ooh. Put that back. Might be a hammer job. Might be hammer time. Do you want to give it some?
Oh no, it's not going to do it, is it?
That's just going to fall apart, isn't it? Concrete.
It's bloody hard.
Yeah.
Strong, yeah. It's bending everywhere but there. But eventually we got there. It was also at this point we decided we'd weld on a bit of additional material, as later down the line we would like to put a roll bar inside the car, and this would be quite a fitting place to mount it to. But for now, let's get this thing tacked up, and then I'm going to quickly head home and check out the state of our axle. Well, here she is. It's been sitting in brake cleaner and degreaser for several days now, so let's hit it with a lot of pressure and see if we can get this thing a little bit nicer. Well, she's certainly not going to win any awards, but it'll be a lot nicer to strip this thing down and not get completely covered in oil. Anyway, back to our chassis strengthening. Before we continue with the side section, I want to get the main X section nice and cleaned up, painted, because the paint will take ages to dry. So let's get that done and then we will get cutting on the side section. If you're wondering why I'm painting this before welding, that's because some sections won't be accessible once it's welded on. So I'm just trying to get as much as I can. It doesn't matter if we have to grind some of it off when we weld it on, at least as much of it will be protected as possible. And now with everything painted and left to dry, it was a new day. So we are back on the side sections. So if it's not already clear, these side rails are going to be welded to the plates, as you can see on the left. Then they are going to wrap around the floor pan, matching its profile, and then be bolted to the top of the X section. So it all should marry together nicely and add a lot of strength. It's also worth noting that the Nova body will be mounting to these too. As of right now, the Nova body basically just mounts to a very thin piece of metal wrapping around the floor pan. But obviously we'll have to have much longer studs which will go through the Nova body, through the floor pan, and then through this box section. So everything will be just very, very strong. Well, at least that's the goal. So after a lot of cutting, and more cutting, the box section was bending as we wanted it to, matching the lines of the floor pan. And that means we can now introduce the next piece of the puzzle, the X section. So hopefully now you can see the vision. Still a little bit of cutting to do so we can get this to actually marry to the X section nicely, but we're getting there. And now, with everything cut and clamped in place, let's get this thing welded together. And just like that, we had our first side rail done. So I'm going to get this thing nicely cleaned up and give it a coat of paint. But I'm going to stick with Old Reliable this time, just some Hammerite, as I don't want to go near that under seal ever again. And then whilst we left the paint to dry, it was time to do it all over again for the other side. But don't worry, I won't put you through it in detail again. So sit back and watch several hours work in just a few seconds. So with another side done and the day rapidly coming to a close, it was time to get everything welded up. We needed to weld the side sections to the back plates, and we also needed to weld the X section in place. Then we should just about be there.
Get some bare metal out. Come on.
and after a very long couple of days, the chassis was reinforced. Of course, there was still a little bit more to do. We wanted to add a bit of triangulation and also needed to blank a few of the box sections off. But everything was looking pretty good, and this chassis was now more than capable of handling all of that extra horsepower. Now, it had certainly been a very busy few days, and by this point I have to say I was very tired, but there was still a couple of things I wanted to do. The first thing was I wanted to get our marginally cleaner front axle back on, just so it was a little bit easier to move it around the workshop over the coming days. The next thing I wanted to do was get the whole underside properly painted, as I'm going away for a few days and I want to make sure this thing is nicely protected in a sometimes quite damp barn. I don't know how to lift with my knees. It just doesn't work. Now with the front axle test fitted, this thing almost looks like a car. Well, not quite. Quite a long way off a car, actually. But we can now move on to stage 2, painting the whole undercarriage. Now, this process might feel a little bit like deja vu, but thankfully this time there's not a fiberglass body mounted to it. Don't get me wrong, I do love my barn, and that on the channel we try and approach things with a very sort of modest setup, but gosh, sometimes I really do wish I had a lift. Okay, so the car is inside and up on its side, which was a little bit of an ordeal. This is definitely a slightly more weighty chassis now, so it's a bit harder to maneuver. The next thing I want to do is paint this thing. Obviously, we are going to add a few bits, so this isn't the final job, but I'm going away for a couple of days to rescue another very silly car from another country, and the barn gets a little bit damp, so I just want to protect everything whilst I can. But before I do that, I just want to show you a couple of small bits. So if it wasn't already clear, obviously our main central X section is welded to the chassis, but these outer sections are just bolted on. Obviously you've seen that they bolt on to basically where the suspension mounting points are. Everything needs cleaning up. But then at the front, as you can see, they actually bolt through this welded piece. So that is how they fit on. They've all been painted, well, that one's been completely painted. This top one has been painted on the inside, but I'm just going to coat what we can see with paint right now, as I said, just to get everything slightly protected whilst I'm away. But that is how the whole thing basically goes together. And yeah, this thing is so bloody strong. There are a couple of bits like this which we're gonna have some gussets on, which will make everything stronger, which is why it looks so unfinished. So same down there, but we'll do that sort of in the new week, and you guys will see a very quick segment of that happening in an episode where we do other exciting stuff. But anyway, let's paint this thing and make it look a bit prettier. Okay, so there we go. The chassis has had its first coat of paint and it is looking very shiny and nice. Of course, it needs a couple more coats of paint. I also need to remove these outer portions that bolt on so I can get behind them properly. The actual beams themselves have been painted behind, but I also need to paint in these sort of gussety areas of the chassis, but that is all fine. I just wanted to get it nice and protected whilst I go away. On top of that, and I'm sure it goes without saying, even though our front subframe is a lot cleaner, it still isn't painted and is crusty and everything like that. Obviously, that along with the rear suspension, we will be dismantling, cleaning up properly, checking everything, painting, replacing bits, building back up. So that's why I haven't touched those two areas, because they need to be properly dived into in the next couple of weeks. But other than adding some gussets, a bit more cleaning up, painting the top and a few more coats on the bottom, the chassis, for all intents and purposes, is done. It is so much stronger. So for those of you who are rightfully concerned about adding a lot more horsepower, what it would do to the chassis, I hope you can rest assured that that will no longer be a problem. On top of that, as you could probably tell by this whole maneuver, it is a lot heavier. Not to the point that it's going to be too heavy. The car is so light, and with the additional power, it was sort of too light in the sense of it would have probably taken off. So the fact we've added this weight in a very uniform, low portion of the car should help keep it nice and planted. So as always, things are moving ahead very well on the Nova build. But on that note, what is to come next? Well, in the next couple of weeks, you are going to see both the engine rebuild and the full suspension rebuild. On the engine front, you obviously saw the dry build, but we need to strip it completely down. Now we know our sort of build plan, clean everything up. We've got loads of new parts for it. We need to build it up properly, get it painted, get it onto the car, and then we can start trying to make it work, which will be fun. And then on the suspension front, as I said, we need to strip everything down, clean it, check bushes, and we also have a new suspension setup which will be fitting, which will replace the rather outdated torsion tube setup. And just like the chassis strengthening, it will help with the whole overall ride of adding a bunch more horsepower to the Nova. So lots of exciting things to come, and yeah, things are moving. If you enjoyed this episode, and even if you didn't, please do like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that sort of thing. It really does help me out, enables me to keep making episodes on these silly cars and building them. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be able to do this every week, so I'm so grateful. And please do keep doing your thing, because there's a lot more silly cars out there that I'd quite like to get my hands on. If you'd like to support the channel further, please do check out my Patreon. It is linked down below. Over on the Patreon, I have behind the scenes access, early access. The patrons see sort of what's going on day to day in a little bit more detail and before the YouTube videos. Also, we are starting a Patreon exclusive build very soon. Another great way to support the channel is merchandise. Again, it is linked down below. All proceeds, as always, just go into the silly cars. But regardless, I'm just so grateful that you're here watching, and all of the support over the last few weeks has been continually overwhelming. So thank you so much. And I suppose until next time, take care, and I will see you then.